Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Knotts, and it's my pleasure to be the first to welcome you today to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial for our Veterans Day ceremony at the Wall. We're here. We made it. It truly is great to be above ground and to be seen and be here seeing all of you today. It's always great to see so many people who are able to be here in person. And I note that we actually have many tens of thousands of people who are watching this ceremony online, and welcome to you all. Today's ceremony is pretty special because it begins a full year of activities during which we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Wall, which was in 1982. So a little later, you will hear more about what we have planned leading up to the official observance of the anniversary right here, Veterans Day in 2022. And now I'd like to just take a minute, if I may, to thank the Wall volunteers and the staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Now I note that we have a couple of groups, thank you. We have a couple of groups here in yellow shirts today, and that's usually what I say, my yellow shirts and yellow hats. Wayne, could you stand up just a second? All right, see the yellow shirt and the yellow hat? You'll see a lot of folks dressed like Wayne here today, and they are the volunteers here at the Wall. For 40 years, they have been the face of this memorial to the general public, over 5 million people a year. And they are truly amazing with their commitment and all of their effort to be able to help people find a name, to explain a little bit of the history of the Wall and how the names are laid out, and I think most importantly to offer a hug when it's needed. So my undying appreciation for all of our Park Service volunteers, the Yellow Hats, and the VVMF staff. I just can't say enough good things about them. You have no idea how much effort goes into an event like this. They are around today, and they are in the bright blue short sleeve shirts. So I would appreciate if you would recognize them and thank them for their efforts as well. And another thanks to the small army of volunteers around the country who are finding photos for our online Wall of Faces. When I started with VVMF over 7 years ago, there were still 10,000 people whose names are on this wall for whom we did not have a photo. And today, that number is down to 27. Now, before we get to our invocation, I'd like to take a moment to remember all of those we've lost over the past year, including a couple of very well-known figures. Joe Galloway was a friend to all Vietnam veterans. He most famously reported from the Battle of the Ia Drang Valley and became the storyteller for that battle. He actually reported during several wars and was and could always be found hanging out with the troops. He will be missed by all those who knew him, especially those who were in that battle in the Ia Drang Valley, and I know we have several of you here today. General Colin Powell is one of our country's most well-known Vietnam veterans. He was a friend and a steadfast supporter of our mission here at the Wall to honor the service and sacrifice of all Vietnam veterans. He spoke in this very spot at the Wall many times, and he always made time to say hello to his fellow veterans who held him in such high esteem. Privately, he was an advisor to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund Board of Directors and gave freely of his time and his expertise. But the reason our board of directors and so many others sought his counsel are his unwavering sense of service to our country, his wisdom, his character, and his strong leadership. Personally, as a Desert Storm veteran, I always admired General Powell as my chairman. It was very clear that the guidance he gave us and the guidance he gave to the president was tempered by his experience in Vietnam. And on the ground, we were confident he was balancing the mission with the well-being of our troops, and we were proud to serve under him. Getting to work with General Powell directly through the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund was a privilege and an honor, and I know that he will be missed by us and many others. Just a few days ago, we lost Senator Max Cleland. Like so many Vietnam veterans, he came home forever changed, having left 2 legs and an arm in Vietnam. But also, like so many Vietnam veterans, he went on to serve his country as in different capacities. In his case, as Secretary of the Veterans Administration and as a U.S. Senator. He was a towering figure among Vietnam veterans, and he finished his public service as the Secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission. If we could, please have a moment of silence for all of the Vietnam veterans we've lost the past year. Thank you. Now, please welcome our chaplain, Commander Thomas O'Flanagan, who will lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. God of endless ages, from one generation to the next, you have been our refuge and our strength. Bless our veterans and all who serve our nation, defending our freedom. Today, let us lift our hearts in prayers and thanksgiving to Almighty God for those sons and daughters of our nation who served in Vietnam. We ask that you embrace the souls of the Americans whose names are recorded here and who bravely gave their lives in service to their country. Keep before us all the cost paid for liberty, as we humbly pray with grateful hearts for all the gifts and blessings you have bestowed on our nation, the United States of America. Let us never forget these heroic souls who laid down their lives for love of our nation and one another, those wounded, those who died, those missing in action, and those who walk among us today. They will never be forgotten. Grant eternal rest to those brave men and women, our nation's heroes, and give them peace that you alone can provide. May this Vietnam Memorial continually bring healing and consolation to those service members and their families who carry the wounds of the war. We know that death does not destroy the bonds that you forge in our lives. As we recount their qualities and tell their stories, it dispels the shadow of death with the bright dawn of life, just as our Gold Star families strengthen us all. Continue to bless those who, through their leadership, operations, teams around the world, make countless personal sacrifices to search for and return those missing in action and those lost on land and sea, to bring closure for parents, spouses, family, and friends who mourn. As a nation, let us honor their memory and all of those of our heroes by bringing forth decisions that lead to authentic and lasting peace. Actions anchored in your holy truth to ensure that as a nation, we do not compromise integrity when assailed by malicious forces. Instead, let us spend each day honoring their service by sustaining their efforts to patriotism, freedom, and peace. In your mercy, please continue to provide our country with service members empowered by their faith, commitment, and dedication to our nation, as is exhibited here at the wall. Eternal Father, bless our country, those who serve and all who strive to bring truth and freedom throughout the world. May we always reflect your direction, establish peace among those of goodwill, pass from victory to victory against all who wish us harm, and grant confusion to our enemies. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Now, as you can, please stand as the Air Force Color Guard from the Military District of Washington presents the colors. Color Guard, present the colors. Singing our national anthem today, we're pleased to welcome musician first class Corey Parker of the United States Band.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Vietnam veteran Sergeant Richard Dorsey, U.S. Army. Remain standing as the color guard then retires the colors and a ceremonial honor guard from the 1st Cavalry Division takes its place above the wall.
All active military, whether in uniform or out, as well as veterans, may render a hand or military salute. And I invite others to put your hand on your heart. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please take your seats. Thanks to the color guard, our singer, and to Sergeant Dorsey. And now I'd like to introduce today's Master of Ceremonies. Alan Buckaloo is the chairman of the board of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. He's a decorated Vietnam veteran himself, a member of the somewhat famous Fox Force Recon Unit, and he went on to a successful career in business, serving as the CEO of Princess Cruises and retiring as the Chief Operations Officer at Carnival Corporation. Please welcome Mr. Alan Buckaloo.
Good afternoon. See if I can find my spot. Before we begin the formal program, I'd like to recognize all the Gold Star family members we have with us here today. The mothers, fathers, wives, sons and daughters, siblings, nieces, nephews, all those who have experienced the loss of a loved one and know all too well the sacrifices that our military families make. And finally, to those still waiting for their loved ones, thank you for joining us. As we begin our program today, I call your attention to our POW MIA chair, which occupies a place of dignity and honor here. Let us always remember and never forget their sacrifices as we continue to work towards the fullest possible accounting of all our missing. For those who do not know, today marks the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknowns at Arlington Cemetery. It's our solemn hope that we will never have to place the remains of another unknown in that tomb. Since today is Veterans Day, I'd like to ask all our veterans in the audience to stand and be recognized. Today is your day. On behalf of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, I would like to thank all of you for your service and welcome you home. Please be seated. I'd like to introduce our partner today in our today's ceremony, the National Park Service. Please welcome Jeff Reinbold, Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the National Park Service, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial on this Veterans Day. To our visitors, distinguished guests, families and friends, and all the members of the armed forces and veterans who are here today, we are honored that you chose to join us. And a special thank you to the families and friends who have traveled from around the country to pay tribute to their loved ones and those they served with. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is one of the most visited sites on the National Mall and in fact, all of Washington, D.C., and definitely one of the most cherished. Maya Lin's design continues to provide a very personal connection to those who were lost and a profound and lasting statement on the impact of war on individuals, families, and society. We in the National Park Service are honored to be entrusted with the memorial's care and to welcome the millions of visitors here each year. It is also our honor to care for the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which recognizes the 265,000 women, all volunteers, who served during the war. I'd like to thank our partner in this endeavor, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, especially its President and Chief Executive Officer Jim Knotts and his whole team, and Stacy Madalena of the Eastern National, who provides educational programming for the Vietnam Women's Memorial. These two individuals and the organizations they represent are instrumental partners in maintaining these memorials and keeping them relevant to current and future generations. I also want to acknowledge our National Park Service staff, some of whom are veterans as well, and our partners and contractors who care for this place and interpret it to the many people who come here. Jim has already mentioned and acknowledged our Yellow Hat volunteers who care for the more than 5.5 million people who come to the memorial each year. This dedicated corps, readily identifiable by their yellow hats and shirts, ensures that all who come to the memorial are greeted with a warm smile, a sympathetic ear when necessary, and information about the war, the memorial, and the men and women who are represented by it. Veterans Day is among the most important days of the year on the National Mall. Today we pause to honor those, past and present, who have served in our nation's military, to contemplate you and your family's many sacrifices, and to reflect on what you've done for our country. But also, we provide you a place to share stories, to get together, maybe share a laugh and a memory. Last month, we were saddened by the passing of General Colin Powell, among the most beloved and respected of our nation's 19 million veterans, and certainly no stranger to this memorial. General Powell will be remembered throughout this ceremony, but I want to share a passage from him that I think is very fitting for this day. He said, "This nation owes a great debt to its veterans, those whose service to the nation spans every decade, every year, every day of our country's existence. Through untold courage and sacrifice, America's veterans have secured the liberty which the Founding Fathers sought to establish here in the New World. Whenever and wherever the nation called, in times of darkness and danger, as well as in times of peace and prosperity, America's veterans have been there. Veterans have proudly carried the torch of liberty for all to see. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Superintendent Reinbold. Next, we always invite a speaker on behalf of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. Lieutenant Grace Moore served as a nurse in Vietnam. She heard about the Army Student Nurse Program in 1965, and after graduating in 1966, she began her active duty. In May 1968, she was transferred to the 12th Evacuation Hospital in Cu Chi, Vietnam, where she was the head nurse of the orthopedic unit. After returning home back to the U.S., she became involved with the Vietnam Women's Memorial Project and has remained active in her local veteran community in Pennsylvania. Please welcome my fellow Vietnam veteran, Lieutenant Grace Moore.
Wow. Good afternoon. It's so good to see all of you. I'm losing it already, right? To see all of you veterans and those people here who support veterans. I'm proud of you. I'm proud and humbled to be standing here today to represent Vietnam and Vietnam-era veterans. My brothers and sisters, each one of you. We Vietnam women veterans stood on the shoulders of the women who served before us. And I can say that personally because my Aunt Martha served in the Navy during World War II. I like to think that the women who have come after us are able to say that they stood on our shoulders and are standing on our shoulders. Those of us women who served in Vietnam and during the Vietnam era were certainly a diverse group of women. We were nurses, we were non-nursing military personnel, we were Red Cross donut dollies, and we were civilians. We represented many ethnicities and many age groups, with the average age being about 23 or so. You could gather 100 of us in a room, and you would hear 100 different but similar stories. There's one common thread that tied us together then and still ties us together now. We were all volunteers. Did we have different reasons for volunteering? Of course we did. But we raised our right hand, we signed on the dotted line, we went forward to do whatever job we were assigned to do and in whatever location we were sent. And we did it to the best of our ability. For many of us who served, it was, and still is, difficult to share our stories and memories of those years. For me, it was 16 years before I even acknowledged to myself that I could be called a veteran, let alone tell anybody else I was one. Then in 1982, the wall behind us was dedicated. I wanted to come to that dedication, but I couldn't work up the courage to do that. It wasn't until 2 years later that I was able to make the journey to this sacred place. On that wall behind me are the names of 8 women. It took me many years and the help of 2 brother veterans to find those names and touch them on a pouring, rainy Veterans Day. But it was a beginning. It was a beginning for me personally and a beginning for my fellow female veterans. Diane Carlson Evans had a vision for acknowledging and honoring all of the women who made up our special cohort of Vietnam women veterans. After 11 years and much grueling work by many volunteers and coordinators in every state, the Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated on a beautiful day in 1993. And I was here for that one. It's a day I'll never forget. That special memorial has become a deep well of cool, refreshing, and healing waters for so many people, both men and women. Each figure in the sculpture holds special meaning for not just the women who served, but for our brothers in arms and for the families of our veterans. It's a place of comfort and reflection for all who come by to pay a visit. My own favorite figure is the one on the back side. If you notice, the other three figures, the soldier and the two women, they're all touching. The one in the back is hunkered down. She's by herself. For me, she represents the aloneness that some of us felt when we were in service over there. And seeing this figure and her vulnerability can be a really good place to start healing. I'm happy to see all of you here as we share these Veterans Day ceremonies and remember the sacrifices of our veterans and what they have done for us. As I have said in many times and in many situations, as long as we say the name of those who have gone before us and those who are still with us, they will never be forgotten. On this day, that we honor our veterans, I would encourage each of you at some point today, some point in this day, to say out loud the name of a veteran that you remember, whether living or deceased. My name will be Jim. In closing, I want to say that I stand here today proudly, representing my fellow Vietnam women veterans and our brothers that we served with so many years ago, as well as the men and women who have served our country throughout time and those who are still serving. I hold close to my heart the title veteran, and I hope for those of you that have that title, you can hold it close to your heart as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Moore. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, General Barry Mccaffrey. Barry Mccaffrey served in the United States Army for 32 years. When he retired in 1996, he was the most decorated general serving in the Army. He served overseas for more than 12 years and 4 combat tours. After leaving the military, he served as director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy for 5 years. In 2007, he was inducted into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame. In 2010, he was honored as a distinguished graduate of West Point. In 2015, this is near to my heart, he was selected for the Doughboy Award, the highest honor the Chief of Infantry can bestow on any infantryman for his outstanding contribution to the United States Army Infantry. Please welcome General Barry Mccaffrey.
Helen, thanks very much for that very generous introduction. My sort of standard joke is it's not as good as the one I got from my son about 20 years ago. He was ordered against his will to introduce me to his 1,000 classmates at the Army Command General Staff College. So he stumbles out on stage and he painfully reads through every word in the longest bio he could find. at the end of which he says, Harvey said, I want you to know that I've worked for this great man for more than 21 years, primarily in the areas of lawn and automotive maintenance. I also got to pay tribute to my RTO and friend, lifelong friend, Rich Dorsey, Sergeant U.S. Army, probably 20 at the time. We were fighting to get First Sergeant Emerson Trainer and a platoon out of a bunker complex. Machine gun opened up, and we didn't see him coming. He got 7 or 8 of us, knocked me down. I heard the round hit Rich dead in the helmet, and he dropped like a wet sack of cement. And I thought, well, that's the end of Rich. But luckily, it followed the outlines of his helmet and semi-scalped him and did some other minor damage. Infantry soldiers don't mind being hit in the head. And he was able to go on to a lifetime of service in the Salvation Army. Just one of the many good soldiers that I was privileged to serve with. Just a remarkable time. We have reunions every 2 years. We didn't this year because of COVID. We're going to come in July. But Rich, thanks for your service. Also, our artillery FO, Mick McMahon, is here. Where are you sitting, Mick? Would you stand up ever so briefly? Silver Star recipient. His 105 Artillery Battalion kept us alive. He also went on to a great career in business, and he's published 4 books, and he's a columnist for newspapers around the country. So we honor him for his service. Let me also just mention again Jim Knotts and his team. I mean, this memorial is a precious asset. It's a complex place to maintain. We're on difficult ground. There's millions of visitors. General John Tillelly, an old friend and the chairman of the Foundation for the Korean War Memorial, they've just rescued their memorial with millions of dollars. It was sinking down into the mud. So it is a huge responsibility, Jim, and we thank you for coming in and stabilizing and regularizing the management and without drama of this beautiful site. So thank you. I was here in 1982 for the dedication. I was here in 1984 for the U.S. Servicemen and Flag, a tremendous addition to Maya Lin's design. And my wife, Jo, was here in 1993 to walk in the inauguration of the Women's Memorial with her dear friend Judy Bramlett, a donut dolly in Vietnam. We'd be remiss to have any ceremony here without mentioning Jan Scruggs. You know, an E4 comes home 20 years old, badly wounded in Vietnam, combat infantry badge, and he says, I'm going to deliver a memorial to honor our veterans. Simply astonishing. Luckily, he didn't understand it couldn't be done. You couldn't get through this Byzantine organization of people that rightfully watch over this sacred mall. But he pulled it off with the help of a lot of people, admittedly. But we honor Jan Scruggs and Maya Lin and all those who were there at the beginning. And Alan Buckaloo, thanks very much for your leadership. You know, the governance, the board of directors has really been rebuilt in a terrific way with different viewpoints now and different perspectives, and some young guys, Afghanistan, Iraq combat veterans, who are also the son of a Vietnam veteran. So, you know, as you get older, the most precious asset you have is your time. So, Alan, let me thank you and all your board members for your devotion to maintaining this memorial. I could not stand up here and not mention again 3 of the Vietnam veterans we've lost. My wife Jill and I came down last week for Colin Powell's funeral. I worked directly for him on 2 different occasions. I used to tell people he kept me around like Grant's captain, another infantry officer he could bounce ideas off. A remarkable man, not just for his distinguished public record, but as I watched him over the years, you know, he'd walk into a White House reception with 300 people in there, and he would seek out the enlisted soldier, the single mother, the law enforcement officer. A very kind person. And thankfully, as Jim mentioned, he was our chairman during Desert Storm. You know, we had Schwarzkopf and Powell. Both had been wounded in Vietnam. I like generals that are a little bit scared of combat. We honor his memory. Joe Galloway is a personal friend. He actually accompanied my division, 24th ID, during Desert Storm in the attack into Iraq, and I known him all his life. But that book by Joe and Lieutenant General retired Hal Moore is one of the top 5 books ever written in English about small unit combat. So if you haven't read it, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, a remarkable contribution. And then Joe, who had 15 years of his life in some disastrous, bloody conflict someplace, went on to be the principal protector of our troops. You know, I used to joke that my wife came out of 4 combat tours with me gone, saying she hated politicians, reporters, and generals. And she hadn't changed her mind about any of them since then, I don't think, except for Joe Galloway. Joe Galloway was the reporter that told America's soldiers' story. I don't know if Chuck Hagel is here today. I didn't see him come. I saw him at the World War I memorial ceremony yesterday. I've known him for years. He should have been the President of the United States. You know, he was a senator, he was a Secretary of Defense, a remarkable public servant, and a huge help to those of us involved in the Vietnam War. Always ready to devote his time, and we thank him for that. Another combat infantry badge and Purple Heart. He and his brother both served as infantry soldiers, enlisted soldiers in Vietnam. I should have also mentioned Max Cleland. We were both in Walter Reed together, you know, Ward 1, what a fraternity that was. Max was devastatingly injured. I mean, both a 6'2", handsome athlete, a tremendous personality, and then despair, and he hit the ground. And then he got up, and he said, "I'm not going to live life as an invalid," and went on to a distinguished career of public service. Finally, let me just say to the Park Service, you know, thank God for what you do for America, not just here at the Vietnam Memorial, but all across this country. They're really the custodians of Americans' legacy and history, and they do a brilliant job, underfunded and undermanned, but they preserve America's heritage. How about a round of applause to the Park Service? So, 5 short points. When we talk about Vietnam, the sacrifice, point number 1. I mean, this is an incredibly bloody conflict. A lot of America didn't get it at the time. It was 60,000 killed. It was 300,000 wounded. It was 75,000 badly maimed who ended up in the VA system, a much maligned but a tremendous organization bringing health care and benefits to veterans. It was a huge sacrifice. I have been back to Vietnam 3 times since the war ended. Once as a government official, once as a speaker, tourist, and once co-chairing with Jan Scruggs and others. About 15 of us, I think, several are here today. We went back, spent 10 days in Vietnam. It was a fascinating trip. We were all worried about going back. We didn't quite know what we'd encountered. We had a meeting with the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese Veterans Organization. Very emotional, hugs, mementos exchanged. They told us we killed 2 million of them. That's not the accepted public number, but I just think it underscores the tremendous disaster of what happened. You know, I'm not here to litigate the Vietnam War history. I think you can make a strong argument that it was part of a global pushback against armed communist aggression throughout the world. I don't think there's much question of that. And thank God we did it. You know, at the end of the day, without using a nuclear weapon or without really engaging in global war, we prevailed. And freedom and democratic states were what resulted. Second point, and our dear friend, the nurse, made it. Every one of us had a different experience in Vietnam. It depended on your MOS, the year you were there, where you were assigned. the fortunes of war. People standing next to you get killed and you're untouched. But it was an air, land, sea team. I was part of a Vietnamese airborne brigade combat team up on the DMZ. We came through the Marine base at Dong Ha. We get up on the Ben Hai River. Tens of thousands of North Vietnamese came across the river to take us out, and we survived. Half of us ended up as casualties because the U.S. Navy and an 8-inch gun cruiser shot for us all night. Because Air Force AC-47s came down under a 1,000-foot cloud cover and hosed down the enemy. And Army L-1 pilots flew down to bring in artillery for us. And the Marines came up with armor to bust us out of the situation. And the medevac, a bunch of us ended up on the USS Repose, the best deal that ever happened to me in the Army as patients. So again, I just stress it was an air, land, sea team. Every one of us had a different experience. And we always talk about the draftees. The height of that war, probably around 3 million people active guard and reserve. 14% of the armed forces are draftees. That's it. The rest of it was draft-induced service. When you went to Vietnam, 1968, 500,000 troops in the field, maybe 40,000 of us directly engaging in combat operations. 25% of the Vietnam force were draftees. When you got to B Company, 2nd and the 7th Cab, the first sergeant and I were the only two RA, the only two over 25, he was 35, and the rest of them were instant NCOs and OCS products and young soldiers with under a year in the Army. We loved those soldiers. They were tremendous. A different experience. Third, we got to take into account the courage of the people we fought. Lord have mercy. The North Vietnamese Army was tough. There were a bunch of teenage boys that were coerced into coming down the trail, no question. They've turned into a, I hate to say it, a semi-corrupt, ineffective regime in the last 40-plus years. But their soldiers were determined. Their tactical leadership was brave and clever, and if you didn't watch what they were doing, they'd kill you. We do need to recognize that in the end, they prevailed. When we came home, a lot of us were angry, really angry, and our families were angry. And in my company, the draftees all took off their uniforms, grew their hair, threw away their ID cards, and went back to work. And they've done well. I mean, we had one of our soldiers die in prison. We've got a couple that are multi-millionaires, but basically they went back to farms and jobs and families and education, and they did just terrific. That anger, thankfully, has turned into reconciliation and pride. And when you look at these VA and Gallup poll surveys, it's astonishing. We as Vietnam veterans are proud of our service. Most of us will say in a poll question, if we were asked to do it again, we would. And where I most intensely saw that was during the Gulf War. We were getting 200,000 letters a day. It was just astonishing from people that said, when the Vietnam vets were in combat, I didn't speak up, never again. So I think it was a contribution to the support for the armed forces. What's our legacy? Well, one legacy is, you know, my son's a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had 60,000 killed and wounded in the war on terror. We forget, you know, there was some of these fights that went on in Iraq and Afghanistan at company level are as intense as anything that happened in the Ad Rang or the Ruhr Pocket or Pork Chop Hill. Unbelievable intensity of combat. I would argue that the best military force we've ever fielded is the current U.S. Armed Forces. And a lot of that was due to the Vietnam, 3 million of us stepping forward in our families and saying, we're going to stand behind these troops. It's an important part of our legacy. The other thing we want to do is we want to tell the political leadership of the country, the democratically elected, you know, pick your party, go vote, vote in the primary, but at the end of the day, use military force as a last resort. Not because you fear we have inadequate power, because you never know how war will turn out with an intelligent, desperate enemy. achieve your objectives, write down what you're trying to do. The second thing, you got to go to the American people and explain what you're doing and ask for support and keep them engaged. If you don't do those two things, we urge you to not deploy the armed forces. We've all got, lots of us got children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren are starting to appear. We're starting to get older. We want to remind the country, to include our own families, that when the country asks you to serve, step forward and do it. God bless you. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks, Donald. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, General Mccaffrey. Now, allow me to direct your attention to the representatives of several of our nation's leading veteran service organizations. I would ask them and all other wreath layers to please come forward at this time. For many years, these veteran service organizations have joined our tradition of laying wreaths at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in honor of all those who have served and sacrificed. While the wreath layers get into position, I'd like to share a few highlights of what's been a busy year for the VVMF this year. Our effort to put a face on every name on the wall is getting very close, as Jim mentioned. As of today, we are down to 27 who do not have at least one photo on our online wall of faces. That means our amazing volunteers have found more than 58,200 photos already. If you have a photo of anyone on the wall, please share it so that we have a complete list for everyone. Our traveling exhibit, The Wall That Heals, is wrapping up a terrific 2021 tour this week at our final stop in Tennessee. Our 2022 schedule will be out shortly. We expect to hit the road in March and visit more than 30 communities around the country. And just last month, we honored nearly 1,000 Vietnam veterans through our In Memory program for those who served, returned home, and later died. We hosted more than 2,000 family members here at the memorial for our long-awaited 2020 and 2021 ceremonies. Next year, as Jim mentioned, will be a big year for the VVMF as we commemorate our 40th anniversary of the dedication of this memorial. As is tradition, our commemoration will end on this day next year as we stand on this spot and read the names of 58,281 names inscribed on the wall. But we have numerous events throughout the year leading up to next November. As a matter of fact, we've already started with an online commemoration. On Sunday, November 7th, we began a daily virtual reading of the names online. Each day, on our website and social media, we're reading the names of those lost on that day from the years 1956 to 1975. This is something we've never been able to do before, and it's only possible because of our photo volunteers have been so successful. We hope you'll listen in and share these readings with others. Now I'd like to tell you some exciting news that VVMS is launching today. As we reflect on the past 40 years with the memorial and all of its remembrance, its outreach, and educational activities, we're also looking forward for the next 40 years and beyond. So today we're announcing the launching of the Legacy Endowment. As Vietnam veterans, we want to know that our service and our sacrifice for our country will always be remembered. We want to know that our great-grandkids will be able to stand on this spot that is so special to us long after we're all gone. The best way to make sure these activities continue is to create this endowment. To start off the Legacy Endowment, I'm excited to share that anonymous donors come forward with a $500,000 match, which means your gift to the Legacy Endowment will be matched up to 50% for each new cash gift or gift established through a will, with a maximum of $25,000 matched per gift. You'll notice in the back of your program there's more information about how to participate, and I would encourage all of you to give consideration to participate in this new endowment. As exciting as that is, we have a lot of commemorative activities planned. Through all these activities, though, we maintain the commitment the wall was built upon, to never forget. I will now read the names of the organizations as they lay their wreaths. While the wreaths are being laid, you will hear the bagpiper Chris Jackson play Amazing Grace. Today's ceremony will close with the playing of taps by Technical Sergeant Aaron Lovelady. If everyone could please stand as you are able. Begin with the National Park Service. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. Gold Star Wives of America. American Gold Star Mothers. First Cavalry Division Association. Jewish War Veterans of the USA. Fifth Battalion, 7th Cavalry Association. Vietnam Veterans of America. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Volunteers. Associates of Vietnam Veterans of America. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock PTSD Group of Washington. Sons and Daughters in Touch. Paralyzed Veterans of America. The Mobile Riverine Force, 9th Infantry Division. Native American Vietnam Veterans. The American Legion. Agent Orange Widows and Survivors Awareness Coalition. Military Times. AM Vets. Verizon Veterans Advisory Board. Veterans of Foreign Wars. U.S. Army OCS Alumni Association. Military Order of the Purple Heart Auxiliary. AmeriCal Division honoring General Colin Powell. And finally, all the other organizations that are here with us today. Please remain standing until taps have been played and the honor guards have exited. This concludes our ceremony for today. Thank you all for coming. Hoorah!